San Diego County is one of the country's top 13 places in the country for human trafficking. This is not something that we want to share or be proud about, but it's something we need to do something about. And recently, a study by the University of San Diego at Point Loma Nazarene University estimates that sex trafficking generates more than $800 million annually just in San Diego County into San Diego's underground economy. And unfortunately, there's up to 8,000 victims a year just in San Diego County. So it's very important that we do our best, and we do it through education and trying to eliminate this scourge here in San Diego County. The tragic stories of people falling prey to human trafficking they're awful to hear. And we hope tonight through education that we can help prevent this from happening in our region to our youth. Someone who has actually really been at the forefront when it comes to fighting human trafficking is our great district attorney, Summer Steffen. She has raised awareness in human trafficking years and years ago, and she has never stopped. She's relentlessly going after this. Up in San Marcos, she recently opened up One Safe Place, which is a fantastic venue for people who may be victims of sex trafficking or human trafficking or elder abuse or anything like that. She created one safe place in San Marcos for people to go in and feel safe about talking about these issues and trying to get help. And we're hoping this gets replicated throughout the county. But she's raised awareness on human trafficking years ago. Her efforts continue to save lives and to serve justice. So Summer, I'm going to pass it off to you, and hopefully we can get into our experts and hope stop human trafficking in San Diego County. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Desmond. It's been an honor to partner with you on so many important issues, including fentanyl and human trafficking. And town halls like this, information, knowledge is power. So all of you who've joined, you are empowering not just yourselves, but your families, your neighbors, your community. There's a ripple effect that happens when people are educated. This really can't be underestimated. I want to tell you from my 33 years of fighting insidious crime and focusing on human trafficking and sex crimes and exploitation of children, that the power of knowledge, of a little bit of knowledge and awareness, truly does save lives. Because remember, the predators really thrive when there is ignorance and when there's a lack of knowledge. This is exactly what they want. So I want you to remember that your participation is not just a listening, but it already has an impact as you join this webinar. I want to tell you a little bit about the big picture in human trafficking. And I know Supervisor Desmond is going to give you some great news at the end that I'll leave to him to share about where we're going as a county. But where we've been as a county is we have not just been on the map as one of the top 13 places for human trafficking, but also as the gold standard for fighting human trafficking. Now, Commander Jeannie Franco and I are not satisfied with that. So long as there is one child that is being sold like a piece of pizza, like this disposable, like they're a product, in our county, we will not stop until this ends. But we have come a long way. We started with this issue where I was a line prosecutor prosecuting these cases. And I want to tell you the hope in this, the power, and you will hear from Keelan Washington later, which will absolutely demonstrate the power of the human spirit to defy the odds, no matter how bad things are, with just a little bit of respect and dignity, to come back and conquer in our community and to be free human beings. But the cases that I prosecuted before becoming DA were atrocious. These are kids really young being sold across San Diego's hotels and across the nation's hotels for sex, horrific cases of intersection of labor and sex trafficking. But many of them, because I'm still in touch with my victims, are thriving members once they're recovered and they're given the trauma services that they need. So there is much hope and much of a role for everyone. But I want to kind of give you the big picture, and that's that human trafficking, the reason it is the second largest criminal industry in the world, in the United States, in California as a top destination, and right here in San Diego, is because of the profit margin. Because when it comes only second to the selling of drugs for money. Now, remember, with drugs, you can only sell that product one time. But if you capture a human being and you make them feel worthless and shameful, and you can resell them as a product over and over and over, which is what human trafficking is, then your profit margin is like that study that Supervisor Desmond referred to. That's at $810 million just for the undercover industry of sex trafficking, which is also an underreported number. This is why there is very strong motivation to continue to find new tools to deceive our kids and our adults into human trafficking. What can we do about it? With social media and the fact that every child has a phone, it has opened up the access even more. And what haven't we done as a society and as parents really well is to actually explain that this tool and the people coming through it, who they really may be and who they are. How the social media paints it as a friend is already a lie. A friend is somebody that you actually is your family, somebody you know. Anybody coming through social media is a phantom. They can be anybody, and they are anybody. So many cases that we've intercepted are someone is a 40-year-old sex registrant predator who is contacting a 12-year-old, even an 11-year-old boy, and they are seducing them, deceiving them into thinking they're the same age, establishing a relationship. And remember what the Surgeon General told us, our kids are having a terrible time of it in terms of their mental health. I know this is something Supervisor Desmond is passionate about. Their suicide, their Rady's Children's Hospital, Palomar, their ranks are filled with kids suffering trauma because they missed a lot of years with COVID, with being in and out of school, in and out of sports, in and out of their faith places. This is the time for every parent, teacher, community member to stop, pay attention, talk to your child about exploitation, human trafficking, about how everybody who comes through your phone, your Instagram, or your Snapchat, your games, which are a big place that boys are captured, your game rooms, whatever image they put up, that could be completely fake, and it often is. You cannot share information with that person, private information. You can't give them where you live, what school you go to. You can't do any of those things, and you must establish a clear line with your child, with your loved one, with your neighbor, with your support system, that if they see something, they're asked to do something funny that doesn't feel comfortable, like as a joke. This is the thing we've been seeing a lot. As a dare, take off your clothes, I'll take off mine. As a dare, as a funny. But once that image is captured of nudity, that is used to exploit that child into doing more, into they feel trapped. So you have to open the door for kids to make mistakes and tell them that it is okay. San Diego's fighting back. Commander Franco will talk about our premier, really one of a kind in the nation, 24/7 task force. We have a dedicated human trafficking division that I had the honor of pioneering, that's been compared as the real life version of Law and Order Special Victims for any fans of Law and Order, with a whole dedicated team, trauma care, everything, prosecutors going after these predators. What is one simple thing that you can do is to talk about the safety of the internet. What is another simple thing you can do? Not just talk to your girls, talk to boys about how terrible it is to even think about the idea of buying a person for sex. Because when you do that, you're lining the traffickers' pockets. There is rarely somebody who wakes up and says, my career, I want to be a prostitute. That doesn't happen. When they're younger, they get trapped in a relationship that they think might be love. Then it turns into exploitation, commercial profit that lines the pockets of the traffickers. Then they are trapped by violence, fear, threats, but also by their own shame that society won't accept them for the mistake that they made. That's very, very important. There is help in San Diego at Family Justice Center, one safe place that I had the honor of opening with the support of Supervisor Desmond, who was there from the beginning. It's a place that you can send anyone that you suspect might be a victim. And the last thing that I want to focus on is that this is really something that kind of creeps up. It's not victims in chains with clear bruising, because the traffickers told us from their own mouths when we go in and investigate, they know better than to do that, because that will bring law enforcement attention. So what happens is more underground. It is deception, it is entrapment, it's sometimes forming a chemical addiction where the child becomes seeking fentanyl, seeking drugs, seeking methamphetamine. So it's very insidious and is not sometimes clear on the surface. This is why it needs the eyes and ears and the knowledge of everyone. At this point, it's my honor and privilege to turn it over to our incredible commander of the Regional Human Trafficking Task Force, Jeannie Franco, who's a Department of Justice supervisory agent that supervises this task force. She does it with a firm hand, and she does it with a lot of compassion for our victims. Jeannie.
Thank you very much. I have a PowerPoint for everyone. Like everyone said, I am Jeannie Franco. I'm the Task Force Commander of the Human Trafficking Task Force. Let me share my screen here. Are we good on the share?
Yes.
Oh, great. We're going to start with the mission here. Sorry about that. I'm sorry, our mission slide didn't come up, but basically the mission of the San Diego Human Trafficking Task Force is to identify and recover victims of human trafficking and hold their offenders accountable. As a task force, we also do a lot of training for local law enforcement and the community. The screen that you're probably seeing now is the participating members. And as DA Stefan said, we have just a incredible collaboration effort here in San Diego when it comes to combating human trafficking. All of the agencies that you see here, which are 14 of them, are all participating members of the Human Trafficking Task Force. You'll see both state and local as well as federal agencies of the task force. All of our task force officers are victim-centered and trauma-informed. This is kind of sets us apart from others that do this type of work, but they are incredible at what they do, and they are very dedicated to combating trafficking. Our advocacy partners, we could not do it without them. We partner with Lifeline in the Bilateral Safety Corridor Coalition. So as DA Steffen said, we work 24/7. We have 2 task force officers and a sergeant who are on call 24 hours a day. So if we get a call at 3 in the morning and we respond and our victim needs services, one of these 2 partners will come out and provide services for that victim. Just incredible. And this does not happen everywhere. I talked to a lot of task forces throughout the country, and we are really lucky to have just incredible partners that do this type of work 24 hours a day. These are our 2023 year-to-date stats for the task force. You'll see 104 leads, and what that means are leads and tips that come into the task force. So typically, these are the leads that come in from our local law enforcement partners that basically, if they encounter something, they call into the task force and say, this is what we've got. We're not sure if it's human trafficking, but can you come and assess? And more than likely, we will come out and basically kind of take over that scene. A lot of victims are interviewed at that time. But sometimes the suspects are also there. And so in that case, a lot of times they're arrested. The leads will also come in from the National Human Trafficking Hotline, that 888 numbers that you see on billboards. We also receive our leads from Child Welfare Services. We have a great partnership with them, so they provide us with a lot of leads. As well as a human trafficking task force, they kind of create their own leads. We are at 121 arrests for this year so far. 78 of those are sex buyers that demand. I'm really big on the demand because they are what's driving the problem. 47 adults recovered so far and 27 juveniles recovered. Last year, we were at 36 juveniles recovered. Excuse me. Human trafficking, just to kind of go over just quickly in a nutshell what it is. Sex trafficking of an adult involves the use of force, fear, fraud, or coercion to take advantage of a person for commercial sex. And labor trafficking, same thing. It's taking advantage of a person for labor. You'll notice that's highlighted there in the middle. Sex trafficking of a minor does not require force, fear, fraud, or coercions because minors cannot consent to commercial sex acts. So if you have a 17-year-old that says, I want to be a prostitute, this is what I'm doing, or I want to engage in pornography, they cannot consent to commercial sex. Victims of human trafficking and traffickers include people of all races and genders, unfortunately ages as well, because we have had juvenile traffickers. What's the task force seeing in San Diego? Well, we're seeing victims as young as 13, unfortunately. And then we see a lot of domestic sex trafficking. I know we're here in San Diego and people automatically think that there's a lot of international sex trafficking happening. And I'm sure there is, but it is very underground is what I'm thinking, because what we get and the leads that come to us are mainly sex trafficking, domestic. Recruiting on social media, this has been out there for a long time. Basically, what these traffickers do is they cast a huge net and see who will bite. Those individuals who are posting a lot on social media, this is a way that traffickers can basically say, hey, what's going on with this person? Let me see if I can get in there. Oh, you need money? I can get you a job. So a lot of the things that are going on are on social media. Instagram's a big one. Snapchat is also a big one. Anything where there's like the talk or text capability, that's opening the doors for traffickers to come in and try to recruit. Branding tattoos, we're seeing a lot of that lately. You'll notice that tattoo that's on the side of the girl's face. These types of things, that's a huge indicator, because how many people want a tattoo of the word loyalty or money bags or money or dollar signs on their face, or even the names of their traffickers? This is again a way for a trafficker to control somebody and basically show that this is their product or their possession. That kind of goes with violent traffickers, right? I mean, if they're branding their victims' faces, it's pretty horrific. We just had a lead not too long ago where we had an individual who kidnapped someone from Las Vegas, brought them to San Diego to traffic them, and this particular person was able to get away and ask for help. We were able to recover her. We arrested that individual, but there are also 2 other victims that he was trafficking, and one he was actually parading her around on a leash at the beach. It was horrific. We're also seeing an increase in street prostitution. After Senate Bill 357, which basically made it no longer illegal to loiter for the purpose of prostitution, the prostitution skyrocketed in the area, which is commonly referred to here in San Diego as the Blade. Why that comes into play is because a lot of the victims that we recover have told us that they have been made to work out on the Blade, both juvenile and adult. So we'll get into the indicators now. So these are some of the indicators that parents should look for. Unexplained luxury items, new clothes, shoes, jewelry, nails, several cell phones. These items are things that cost money. And if someone doesn't have a job, how are they getting these things? Those are questions to be asked. Bruises or tattoos. Again, especially if they're a juvenile, how are they getting a tattoo? Who's giving them that? STDs are very common. Pregnancy as well. We're starting to see a lot of juveniles who are getting impregnated by their trafficker, unfortunately. Multiple hotel keys, multiple social media accounts, excessive use of internet chat rooms, use of alcohol or drugs, depression or isolation, overly tired, dropping grades, truancy, changing in friend groups, older boyfriends or secretive relationships, knowledge of the life or the game. So if they kind of know what's happening and have that lingo down of the prostitution activities known as the game, that's kind of an indicator. How are they knowing about all these things? Or running away? So it's not just one of these indicators. There could be several. So I'm going to go over some vulnerabilities on the next slide. But it's all of these things, the totality of all these different things that parents should be looking for. Because again, depression, the overly tired, dropping grades, truancy, and running away, all those things are very common in the juveniles that we recover. Risk factors, age, obviously that's a big one. You see, because we are recovering the juveniles, runaway or homeless. Again, so a trafficker is a master manipulator. And so they will exploit a person's vulnerabilities. So if this person knows that they no longer have a place to stay, maybe they ran away, maybe home life is not great, this trafficker can come in and say, well, you know what? I've got a place for you to stay. You don't have money? I can get you a job. You can work with me. We'll do this together. That's how all of that manipulation starts. And once they get in it, they can't get out. Again, financial problems, because maybe they don't have a means to take care of themselves. So they are more vulnerable to a trafficker who is telling them that they can make money together. Prior trauma, we see this one a lot with our juveniles that we recovered, even our adults, where sexual, physical, or mental abuse, family violence, neglect, poor self-esteem. So if you've got a juvenile who is online and kind of putting that information out there, again, that exploiter is looking for those types of things to exploit them. Lack of parental involvement. This is a big one. You have to know what's going on with your kid. You have to be able to watch their internet use and be engaged in what's going on and pick up on those changes. Lack of support from family or peers. Involvement with the child welfare system. This is a big one as well. A lot of the recovered victims that we have are in the child welfare system. Mental health challenges and undocumented or unstable immigration status. Again, these are all things, vulnerabilities that a trafficker can use against a person. Operation Cross Country, just recently, you may have heard on the news that there was an FBI-led nationwide initiative in partnership with NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they focus on basically identifying and locating victims of sex trafficking. So these were their stats nationwide. The task force participated in that, and we did 3 undercover operations, and we had a day of outreach where we did training for local law enforcement as well as the community. Within those undercover operations, one of the days we got a lead from NCMEC telling us that they had a juvenile that was missing out of Georgia, and it looked like she had been posting advertisement, or someone was posting advertisements of her in San Diego, sex advertisements. So within an hour, our task force officers were able to find those ads, set up an undercover date, and we recovered her at a motel in Chula Vista. Another one of those operations, we worked closely with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, ICAC, and we arrested an individual who came from North County down to South County, thinking he was going to have sex with a 12-year-old. So those are just a couple of the operations that we participated in during Operation Cross Country. And as a result, 13 adults and 2 juveniles were recovered. We had 4 arrests, and we did 5 human trafficking trainings. So reporting, if you feel like there is something that is just not right and you kind of remembering those indicators and those vulnerabilities, please reach out to local law enforcement and let them know that, look, I'm not sure if this is human trafficking, but these are the things that I'm noticing and I'm concerned. We ask that you call local law enforcement or 911 if it's an emergency situation. If you don't feel comfortable calling law enforcement, you can always call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Anything that San Diego County related will get directly sent to us here at the task force. And this is a QR code. We're really happy about this. This was something that we got with our advocacy partners with and basically created this. You can click on this, and this is all the resources here in San Diego. And that's all I have. Hopefully that was within my time frame.
Yeah, thank you, Jeannie. I really appreciate it. And thank you for those resources. Hey, one quick question we got, I figure you could answer quickly, is where is the Blade?
So the Blade is an area within San Diego and bordering National City, Del Bergia, Roosevelt, that area, Main Street.
Thank you. Well, thanks for what you do. Thanks for being the boots on the ground, especially. And I'm sure we'll have some questions for you here at the end. I want to kick it over now to Keelan Washington, who has a very emotional and inspirational story as well.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be having this conversation because I'm a firm believer that education is where prevention starts. As I reflect on my own history of trafficking, something I wish would have happened a long time ago is that somebody would have educated me when I was a minor, that somebody would have educated my mother on how to have these conversations. Because I believe that if it was introduced to me at a younger age, it could have been the determining factor of me actually being exploited or not, because I would have known what I was up against at that point. But we didn't. There was no education on what trafficking was. When we're looking at trafficking in San Diego, I think sometimes we think it's just the one-off and it doesn't happen that often. But it's not true. It's a common misconception. I'm born and raised in San Diego, and I met my trafficker when I was just 14 years old. And I think that there was this idea with trafficking that we commonly see when it comes to like the movies, right? Like taken, like you're thrown into this van, somebody kidnaps you, and this is what trafficking looks like, but it's not. And I think that idea ends a lot of survivors in some harmful situation because they don't know how to prevent it at that point, if that's all we're looking at in that way of it happening. With my story of exploitation, I was at the mall with a group of friends. This is something we did all the time, and we went to just go hang out. We were doing some shopping, and as we were exiting the mall, we ran into a group of guys. One of the guys asked for my phone number, and it didn't create any red flags for me, and so I gave him my phone number. And one thing kind of led to another. Our text messages led to phone calls. Our phone calls led to us hanging out. And before we knew it, I felt like I was in a relationship. And this is kind of what we call the grooming process, where my trafficker took the time to understand what were my vulnerabilities. He was love bombing me. So he was taking me out on dates. He was paying for things. He was telling me that I was loved and cared for. And what he was doing is he was building this manipulation and this trust between me and him. So then I would end up being codependent on him. After about 4 months of being groomed by my trafficker, he invited me over to his house. He cooked me dinner. What was out of the norm was I was 14 and he was 19 at the time. And so already there's something wrong with that. But I went over there to have dinner with him, and he was telling me that he was behind on some of his bills, his car note, his house. and that he knew how to get some money, but it's not really something he really wanted me to do, that it was only going to be for a short time, that I was safe. And I think I had this idea like, well, that kind of stuff doesn't happen here. And it's only things that happen in third world countries, right? Until it happened to me. And so shortly after being trafficked here in San Diego, I was raped by one of my buyers. And I remember going back to the hotel and telling him like, oh, I can't do this anymore. Like, we have to find another way to get the money. Everything that you promised me was a lie. And so as soon as those words fell out of my mouth, that person who I felt loved me and cared for me and was building this real relationship with me, I never seen that person again. There was a completely different side as soon as I tried to not engage in getting him any additional money. At the hotel, he ended up beating me and telling me the whole time that if I tried to leave, not only would he kill me, but he'd kill my mother too. And those were some of the last things that I remember before he beat me unconscious. I remember waking up later and he came into the room and he told me to get in the car. And at that time I was frightened, so I did what I was told. And then he ended up taking me out of the state of California and selling me in over a dozen states. My mom was looking for me. They ended up, my mom went to the news. They put us up on the news saying that I was kidnapped and this was my trafficker. He took me. But by that time that law enforcement and the news were involved, he had already taken me out of the state of California. And the whole time when I'm looking at like, what does exploitation actually look like? And being at the age of 14, right, we talk about the blade. And so to paint a better picture is like, you have this 14-year-old girl who's standing on the corner and these grown men are coming to purchase rape, and then dropping this girl back off on the corner to then be sold to somebody else, sometimes 10 to 15 times a day. And it's not a 9 to 5. It's not like you get the weekends off or you're keeping some of this money. I did not keep any of the money that was profited off of me. I was sold online. I was sold on Craigslist, the place we go to find jobs and get free product. You were able to go on there and purchase children. I was sold in casinos. I was sold in escort services. And so my trafficker really isolated me to be completely dependent on him. I think sometimes there's this misconception when we look at survivors and we're like, well, you're standing on the corner, you're online, so why don't you just leave? Right? Like, I think sometimes we think it's that easy, but there is this psychological bondage that tends to happen. And so not only was I being physically abused, my family was threatened. He kept all of my documentation. He could put me in complete isolation. But there's also a viewpoint in this, is that society confirmed the narrative of that I was less than and there was no support out for me. Because when I look at who were my buyers, that was another portion that kept me in the life of exploitation. Is like, I tried to get out, but then I was penalized and I was thrown in jail with a criminal record. I had doctors, I had politicians, I've had everyday fathers who were purchasing me, who had wives, who then went back to their families and had kids who were the same age as the people that they were purchasing. And this happened over a span of almost 4 years, being sold country to or state to state. And there was no break in that. There was no help at that time when I tried to get out of the life. But when I look back at it now and I think about, well, what would have helped, right? We're talking about the education behind what trafficking looks like. But I think what's interesting is there a willingness for us to have honest conversations, not only as a community, but with our children? I have a daughter who's 16 now, beautiful daughter. And I think one of the hard part was being honest to her about that there are perpetrators out there that are willing to prey and use her. And how do I get her into a space of education and learning how to defend herself? How do we talk about the red flags? How do we as families and communities understand what are the vulnerabilities? Because we all have them. What are the vulnerabilities that we are having? Our children are often in these environments, in these high schools, where they're already being exposed to sex. I've worked in high schools and middle schools, and when I go into these high schools, especially the middle schools, what I find is 8 out of 10 times after our presentations are over, we have children who are coming up to us either saying that they've been trafficked, that they know somebody who's been trafficked, or it's happening in their family currently. So if it's already happening in our high schools and our middle schools, like, we need to be addressing them. We need to create safe space to have honest conversations with our children. But I'm a firm believer that, like, it does start here. It starts with us being honest and having the conversations on what does it look like. And I think having the realization of it's prevalent. This is not a one-off issue. As I work with the organization Generate Hope, like, we're a long-term residential program for survivors of human trafficking. And these survivors who are coming into our program, 9 times out of 10, were not trafficked when they were adults, but were trafficked when they were children. So that just goes to show how prevalent it is here in San Diego. And so I'm thankful that we are in a space to have an open dialogue of what it really looks like, and then being able to be a part of the solution. So thank you for allowing me to share.
All right. Well, thank you, our District Attorney Summer Steffen, Commander Jeannie Franco, and Keelan. Thanks for your very kind of gut-wrenching story, and appreciate your willingness to share it with us, and hopefully we can all learn from your mistakes, and hopefully other kids won't go through that same thing. I just want to say that last month, Summer Steffen and I, our district attorney, we partnered at the County Board of Supervisors meeting to increase education on human trafficking in our schools. This curriculum raises awareness about the tactics employed by traffickers, hopefully points out the red flags of potential trafficking situations, and how to seek help if they or someone they know potentially falls victim. So the Board of Supervisors action included increasing human trafficking evidence-based training and education materials across the county to parents, guardians, students, staff, school staff, and teachers. And we also want to work with institutions and officials in the California State Legislature as well to require enhanced human trafficking awareness education in our classrooms for all staff, teachers, and students. The county, and we also asked for the county staff to employ opportunities for additional funding to support on-campus human trafficking prevention programs. I don't know if you've seen recently or you've been on recently. I noticed on YouTube that there is a more of a presence about fentanyl and fentanyl awareness. We asked the county to put that effort several months ago, along with Summer Steffen again, is to get education out about fentanyl and how that one pill can kill you. Well, we want to do that same type of education and outreach here on the human trafficking. It was kind of, when I first started questioning about this, education, one of my questions that I had was, well, what grade levels do we try to focus on? We do know right now that fentanyl is being given to 7th and 8th graders, fentanyl awareness. And we really want to expand this as much as we possibly can to all ages, all age groups, in age-appropriate education. I was surprised when somebody said, well, from kindergarten on up until high school. And I was a bit taken back as, well, kindergartners, what are we going to say to kindergartners? And it was primarily that, hey, here's your body, this is your boundaries. You nobody but mom and dad or, should be touching you anywhere. And just learning about boundaries and things about their own body, that, they have their rights to that. And so it was kind of very interesting to me about age appropriateness and how we can get this information out to as many people as possible. And I really appreciate everybody's passion on this. So I'm going to toss this back to Miles for any questions and answers, or if you've got people I know in the chat room. Probably most of people, either Summer Steffen or Keelan or Jeannie or myself, whoever can answer these questions. We'll try to get you as much help as we possibly can and fight this and hopefully stop human trafficking in San Diego County.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor. And so if you're just joining us or if you're getting here late, we have the question and answer. And if you want to put in those questions, we'll do this for about 20-ish minutes. Get your questions. And again, if you don't get your questions answered, feel free to email us. One of the questions I wanted to start with, and Summer, maybe you can take this or whoever, we've gotten a lot of questions about just people wanting to get involved, volunteering, whether it's at One Safe Space or just wanting to get involved. So how could they do that?
No, that I saw that question, and it's really great to see the spirit here. It makes a big difference. I know some people think it's like maybe volunteering at the Human Trafficking Task Force. Those were some of the questions. You know, we welcome volunteers everywhere, but that is a sensitive kind of law enforcement hub with a lot of confidential information about operations that we're working on. As Commander Franco mentioned, we're contracted or we're helped by 2 official 24/7 responders, victim advocate responders that have been trained in trauma and have lived experiences. But there are many other spaces that people can volunteer. The number one thing I think Supervisor Desmond and I would ask you is to assist us in implementing this education program in the schools. Meaning sometimes we see that parents are a little bit nervous whenever there is any kind of new education coming, but it's because we have this false idea that we can protect our children from fentanyl, from human trafficking, from exploitation. And really the best protection for them is to be the ones that give them the information instead of having it come from their friends, from strangers posing as friends. So assist us by opening and welcoming education, because in the study that was done in San Diego, 90% of our high schools had active cases of human trafficking, 90%. The entry age average was 16, with many 12, 13, 14, and 15-year-olds, but at an average, that was the entry into sex trafficking. In the operation that Commander Franco didn't talk about, but that put a stop to the crazy ideas that were going on in Sacramento about decriminalizing. They had decriminalized loitering for prostitution. I'm sorry, Supervisor, if that, I'm just, talking plainly. Loitering for prostitution, that really was the impetus for how we have now an open, essentially slave market on our streets. I took a ride along there. It's shocking. A 13-year-old was dropped off at 2 a.m. to be sold. We have it right in our investigation. This is not some imaginary news. They already had a bill that was ready to decriminalize all prostitution. That means we can't protect anyone. But our operation Better Pathways and the recovery of 8 kids with a pregnant gal, a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, that put a stop, because it's right on video that no one can argue with the facts. So what you can do is be alert to legislation. That's a volunteer effort. That's you standing with us to fight against bad legislation and support good ones like Senator Grove's bill that made the sex trafficking of kids a serious crime. How did this not happen yesterday? Or the minute it happened, I don't know, but at least it is law now. But we have One Safe Place. So this is removed from the actual operations where you can volunteer. We have organizations like Keelan's Generate Hope and others that have volunteer opportunities, because victims need a mentor and they need somebody that believes in them, that one-to-one relationship when they're okay in their trauma journey. So I hope that answers that question.
And you kind of touched on it there, but we've gotten some questions on the Senate Bill 357 and actually SB 14 as well. Can you talk about those? And
oh yes, we've tried to roll it back now that we have proof certain that decriminalizing doesn't mean protecting victims. Decriminalizing is dehumanizing. America is a country of laws. That's how we protect people. But we don't want to give up. Keep writing your senators and Congress people to roll back and realize it was a failed experiment, that taking away of the loitering for prostitution crime. On the other hand, the bill by Senator Grove is going to make a big difference, because when you don't have something on the books as a serious crime, it means that you get 50% credit in prison. You are eligible for release under Proposition 57, which happens all the time. We fight the battle and then the traffickers right back on the street because they're released early from prison because it's not a serious felony. It means if you become a trafficker again, which happens also often, you don't get double the sentence. There's no additional consequence. So having a serious felony has a lot of good ramifications that help us to hold the line and keep kids protected.
Jeannie, I saw, and I'll put this to you and Summer, if you have any thoughts as well. One of the things I know when we did the fentanyl town hall, one of the ways on social media was with emojis, like so parents didn't even quite know what their kids were communicating. Are you guys seeing that same thing with emojis, or maybe a different lingo that parents might not understand?
The language always changes, and so do the emojis. I think they're up on that. I do just say, just be engaged and aware of what chat rooms they're in, having access to who their friends are online and what messages are being sent to their children. Because again, like I said, these traffickers kind of cast that net to see who bites, basically. And we see this with all of our traffickers when we go through their messages, that they're continually just putting it out there to see who bites. So just be engaged in their communications online, again, because that language changes. So they're going to have to be on top of it.
Yeah, and Miles, I want to add that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, this is a place I drive people because they have a NetSmarts whole section that helps even families that are not really techie people to understand the internet more and to help protect their kids and look at resources on how you navigate that. But in my experience, because like Commander Franco says, the language changes, the tricks change. It used to be like roses is the number of dates and it represents different, it changes all the time. And this is why what's important is to have communication and to basically say, look, if you're uncomfortable, come to me, and please do not threaten to take your kid's phone away because they won't come to you then. But instead, let your kids know that if they come to you, you will make their phone safe again, meaning kick out that person from their internet, contact the social media so that they can eliminate them and stop their communication. It's about that communication with your kid.
One thing I'll just kind of add here, I know Keelan had mentioned it, that, to get involved in human trafficking or be subject to it, it's not just somebody picks you up off the street and, throws you in a van and now all of a sudden you're doing that. Your teenage son or daughter could be on the couch right next to you, communicating on their phone with somebody, and you don't even know it. It's really hard, and I kind of like your District Attorney Summer Steffen's comment. If you take their phone away, then they're gonna turn on you. So it's really a delicate dance and of knowing what your kids are doing online, and there, as you see it, and with most of the population lately, we're all with our face in a phone. So just knowing that, I think in dealing and seeing some of the signs, I thought that was a great list of PowerPoint that you put up there, Commander Franco, that showed signs, of or red flags that popped up. So that was, I just wanted to add that quick little comment there, that your kid could be, buying fentanyl or being sold sitting on the couch next to you.
Yeah, and if you're just joining us, feel free to put a question in the Q&A there, and then we'll also feel free to email us. Keelan, one thing, and I want to be, again, your story really is impactful. One kind of stigma we hear is like, you need to break away. Like, why don't they run away? Can you just talk about being in that? Because you're the one that's been there. Can you talk about why it is so hard to just break free when you're in that cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. There's this piece to us that we sometimes miss and I think what's important is understanding what psychological bondage actually looks like. Because there is this ideology like, well, she's walking around and she's free and she can just walk away. We see that with DV victims all the time. Like, why didn't you just leave? Right. And so, like I shared a little bit earlier, like there were so many components that held me in that space, right? Like there was the threats to my family, there were the isolation tactics, there were torture tactics. There's also this space of like, I'm in this environment for such a long time, and I'm watching other traffickers abuse their victims. Like I knew women who were murdered during that time. And so you really sit in this space of like, and I hit this component of like, okay, so if I leave, like I may be murdered, right? Like I tried to leave when I was 16 and my trafficker ended up finding me. Like I never was able to make it back to California. And so that abuse ended up turning into torture and got 10 times worse. And so you hit this space of like, if I try to leave, I risk being killed by my trafficker. And so you lose all aspects of hope. Like I think there's this space when we're looking at what trafficking is. I think we just have to call it what it is, right? Like people are purchasing rape. We see what happens to a rape victim once they're raped once, right? It changes and alters their identity and who they are forever. When you take a victim who has been raped hundreds, if not thousands of times, that mental space that survivors just have to even be able to get a ground basis is really difficult. Because now what's happening is you create an environment where everything is a threat. Not only your trafficker, but now you're with your buyers, you're out in society. And so everything becomes a threat to you. So it is very difficult to leave and be able to exit the life of exploitation. So it's really difficult. We see survivors that sometimes they're in the life for a year, sometimes they're in for 20 years before they're actually able to get out.
Wow.
Thank you. Supervisor, I know you know these stats, so I'll throw this to you. One of the questions we just got is the numbers in San Diego annually or whatever you have there.
Well, this is the Point Loma Nazarene University. I could just kind of repeat that. We have up to 8,000 victims a year, and those a year here in San Diego County, and that's the ones we know of. It could be a lot more. I'm not sure the year that this study was done, but it's a lot more than people would think. So 8,000 victims a year here in San Diego County, which is way too many.
I'm going to kind of put this to anyone who wants to answer, but we've gotten kind of some of this question, right? Like a philosophical, why isn't human trafficking spoken about more? And I don't, Keelan, Summer, whatever, why isn't this kind of the top of the radar when we talk about crimes, when we talk about this? Is there, if anybody can kind of answer that one more philosophical?
Keelan, you want to take that?
You can go ahead. I'll follow your lead.
Okay.
I'll jump in real quick. I had a hard enough time just talking about sex with my kids, much less human trafficking. I mean, the kids don't come with a manual, and so it's I guess it's awkward, and how do you get past that? I think it's difficult as a parent.
And I want to add, because I think what we've done great in the last couple of years is understanding that it's not prostitution. What we've done for a long time, for centuries, is said it's prostitution, so it's your fault. So then it took off the blame as us as society, then to even want to engage or change anything. Why would we when it's the victim's choice to be in this? Once we started to understand that it's not prostitution, that these women, these children did not ever choose this life, then we have to sit in this space where we are conflicted. I'm a firm believer that once you know something and you're educated, it becomes a personal decision. Either you become a part of the problem or you become a part of the solution. And so I think, to be honest, sometimes I think, for maybe some of the people who are on here today, may be the first time that they're hearing that this is actually what trafficking is. And so bringing awareness and shifting that narrative, I would say, has started within the last decade, but there's still so much to learn. But I think it's a hard concept to grasp, that our children in our communities are being sold for sex. That is a hard concept to swallow. So yeah.
And from a law enforcement perspective, like Keelan was saying, it's a matter of how it's perceived through law enforcement's eyes. Looking at it a little differently than just prostitution. What else is behind it? Is someone forcing them to do this? So that's something that the task force does on a regular basis, is train local law enforcement, so they have a good understanding of what human trafficking is. And so they're the ones that are going to spot it quickly. And so once they're able to spot it, then those are more eyes to report.
And that's exactly right. That's when I mentioned that San Diego is now also the leader in it, is we have done the training. I got to do the first training at the task force, since it was my dream to have it form. And it's about shifting that lens with regard to human trafficking and what it really is. And then when law enforcement shifted, then we also trained all of our firefighters, because they sometimes didn't know, when they go into homes in different situations, massage parlors, what are they really looking at? When there's cameras on the inside, what are they watching those cameras? Who's being held there against their will? So that training, we trained all the medical professionals. So when a nurse that I talked to, her daughter was a victim of human trafficking. She her daughter for years, and she found out randomly that her daughter was actually at the hospital, having been beaten by the trafficker, and claimed that it was a car accident. So the hospital let the daughter go back with the trafficker. All of these are well-intentioned community members, but they didn't know what they were looking for. They didn't know the right questions to ask. I know there were some questions about hotels and motels. This has been a training that's been going on. There's a free training by the Harbor Foundation, the San Diego Police Harbor Foundation. You can look up the San Diego Harbor Foundation. You'll find that free training for anyone. There's a few owners, managers of hotels. There's a great trainings for your hotels, your motels, for the frontline clerk, the housekeeping, the security that we are doing for everybody. The more eyes and ears, the more this becomes exposed, and the traffickers can't hide in the face of that.
I know we're going to wrap up here soon, and I really appreciate everyone for being on here. But before we go, I just want to kind of go through all our panelists here, kind of a wrap up, kind of final words, final thoughts as people go out and hopefully educate their kids and everyone around them. And Summer, if you want to kick it off.
Yeah, I mean, take down today, record the number for the National Human Trafficking Center. The number is 1-888-373-7888. So I remember it as, 3737 with 2 888s on the side. That's like the age that you always think is a great age. You're smart enough, but you're young enough. So 3737, or text to Be Free. And the text works. I once in a while test it just to make sure it's still live. Be Free, BEFREE, in case you can't talk or you're nervous about asking questions. Have a conversation today with the person you love. And there was a lot of questions about how do you approach that conversation. The way I think best to approach it, just in my humble from doing this work, is not to say, I think there's something going on with you and there's something wrong with you, my child, but to say, I heard this, I hear it's very common. I want you to know the information, because you could have a friend or somebody that needs this help, and talk through it from a confrontational, but more about how are you gonna establish your knowledge to help your friends to be an upstander and help your friend. So when your friend says, I'm dating this older guy, this is why I have this great jewelry and have all of this stuff, you don't say, oh, that's really terrific, how wonderful, how did you get an older guy? You start to say, are you sure that's a good thing? I heard this, I heard that, and the conversation goes on. And then support Jim and I, Supervisor Desmond, in making sure that the schools all have the right age-appropriate training.
Jeannie, if you want to take any final thoughts.
Yeah, I would say report. Even if you're not sure, it's better to just report it. Let it come to us and figure out if there is something there. Because if you do have that feeling, more than likely there's probably something going on. So please report. Another thing I would say is let's campaign against the sex buyers. Again, they're the ones that are driving up this problem. And so if we kind of get together on that campaign and make it that, so it's not so sensationalized to, oh, I'm going to go out and have sex with someone for money and make it a joke and this and that. It's more, look, this is not the thing to do. Let's campaign against sex buyers.
Keelan, any final words from you? I, again, appreciate you being here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, it's cutting out on my end. As I'm thinking about this, again, like I mentioned before, it really does start with us. And I know that there was a question like, at what age do we begin to have these conversations with our children? And so as I think back of going into the middle schools with kids who are 11 and 12 years old, and we're having these conversations, a lot of the time they're not surprised by some of the information that we're bringing up, or they've already been exposed to so much. And so I would just say, like, now is the time to bringing up these hard and crucial conversations with our kids. My daughter's 16 now, but we had this conversation a long time ago. And the one thing is like, as a parent, it is my obligation to create safety for her and bring awareness so she's fully informed to protect herself. And so I believe that that's what is just vital in these conversations, is that while the conversations are difficult, it's not easy to have these conversations, but it could be the difference between our own kids in our community being trafficked and not. And so I just continue to encourage that we're having effective conversations and that we're having hard conversation. There is a lot of resources out there on what trafficking looks like, how it affects our communities, and what does it look like in our high schools and middle schools. And so I would just encourage that.
All right. Well, I just want to say, Miles, just thanks again to our District Attorney Summer Stephan, to Commander Jeannie Franco, and also to Keelan Washington for sharing this tonight. Hopefully, those of you that are on this town hall have gotten some good information. If you have further follow-up questions, you can contact my office, or maybe even Summer's office, and we can help you get maybe the help you need. But we do need your help and your advocacy to get this information out. I'm going to continue to fight at the county for resources to get information out on social media as we can, and to keep this, unfortunately, on the forefront, so that we can hopefully battle this and keep this. Get rid of this in San Diego County, this human trafficking. And to everyone that was on here tonight, we're going to email you a copy of this Zoom program here tonight if you want to share it with your friends or family, or watch it with your kids. It'd be greatly appreciated. So I want to say thank you very much to everyone. Reach out anytime, and thank you for being here and learning, and talk to your kids. Take care and good night.